When Max, a devoted chocolate Labrador in Alaska, suddenly stops eating, his owner, Ella, is desperate to save him. Despite visits to the vet and trying every food imaginable, Max refuses to eat as he stares out the window day after day. The mysterious cause of his hunger strike will test the bonds of loyalty and love, revealing a secret mission that only Max understands. As a deadly blizzard descends on Juneau, time is running out to solve the mystery that could save Max's life. Ella Parker knelt beside Max's food bowl and frowned. For the third day in a row, the shiny stainless steel dish sat untouched, kibble piled high just as she'd left it that morning. "Come on, buddy," Ella said, patting the worn wooden floor of their cabin. "You need to eat something." Max, her chocolate Labrador, looked at her with sad brown eyes, but didn't move from his spot. By the window, the 6-year-old dog had been sitting there for hours, his chin resting on the windowsill, staring out at the snowy landscape beyond. Outside, Mendenhall Glacier loomed in the distance, a giant frozen river that had watched over Juneau, Alaska, for thousands of years. Usually, Max would be bouncing around the cabin, ready for their evening walk along the nearby trails. But today, like yesterday and the day before, he just stared outside, waiting. Ella ran her fingers through her dark hair, tucking loose strands behind her ear. As a wildlife photographer, she was used to waiting patiently for the perfect shot of eagles, bears, or whales. But Max's behavior had her worried sick. "Look what I have," she said, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a small piece of smoked salmon, Max's absolute favorite treat. The lab's nose twitched slightly, but he didn't turn his head. "It's from Jerry's Smokehouse downtown. The good stuff." When Max didn't react, Ella felt a knot form in her stomach. This wasn't normal. Max loved salmon treats so much he could smell them from across the lake. Something was seriously wrong. She sat cross-legged on the floor beside her dog and gently stroked his chocolate-colored coat. "What's going on with you, boy?" she whispered. Max sighed heavily, but kept his eyes fixed on the snowy driveway outside. Ella glanced at the half-full water bowl. At least he was drinking a little. But a Labrador not eating for 3 days? That was cause for alarm. She stood up and grabbed her phone from the kitchen counter, careful not to knock over the stack of wildlife magazines where her recent photos of bald eagles were featured. She dialed the number for Juneau Veterinary Clinic, which she unfortunately knew by heart after Max had eaten a pair of her wool socks last winter. "Juneau Vet Clinic, this is Marcy," a friendly voice answered. "Hi, Marcy. It's Ella Parker. I need to bring Max in. He hasn't eaten in 3 days." "Oh no, poor Max," Marcy said. "Dr. Wilson has an opening at 4 today. Can you make it?" Ella looked at her watch. It was already 3:15. "We'll be there." Getting Max into the car was usually a battle of trying to contain his excitement. Today, he followed her with his head down, climbing slowly into her old blue Subaru without his normal enthusiasm. As they drove through downtown Juneau, Max didn't even perk up when they passed the harbor, where he loved to watch the seaplanes take off and land. The streets were wet from melted snow, and gray clouds hung low over the surrounding mountains. A typical March day in southeast Alaska. The vet clinic was warm and smelled of antiseptic. Max's nails clicked on the tile floor as Ella checked in at the front desk. "He hasn't eaten anything?" Marcy asked, looking down at Max with concern. "Not a bite," Ella confirmed. "Not even salmon treats." "Dr. Wilson will see you now," Marcy said, leading them to exam room 2. Dr. Tasha Wilson was a young veterinarian, with kind eyes and a gentle touch. She greeted Max warmly, but the Labrador only gave a half-hearted wag of his tail. "So he's not eating," Dr. Wilson said as she began examining Max. "When did this start?" "Friday evening," Ella replied. "He was fine that morning, but by dinner he wasn't interested in food. I thought maybe he'd found something outside and eaten it, but he's never gone this long without eating before." Dr. Wilson checked Max's gums, felt his belly, and took his temperature. "No fever," she noted. "His gums look good, and his stomach doesn't seem tender." For the next 20 minutes, Dr. Wilson ran tests and checked Max thoroughly, while Ella stood nearby, fidgeting with the zipper of her jacket. "His blood work looks normal," Dr. Wilson finally said. "I don't see any obvious physical problem." "Then, why won't he eat?" Ella asked, her voice cracking slightly. Dr. Wilson knelt beside Max and scratched behind his ears. Dogs, especially labs, can sometimes stop eating due to emotional distress. "Emotional distress?" Ella repeated. "But nothing's changed at home." Dr. Wilson looked up at her. "Has Max lost anyone recently? A person he was close to? Or maybe another pet?" Ella felt her chest tighten. "Well, my friend Ben was staying with us for a while. He and Max were really close. Ben left about 3 weeks ago for a job up north, but Max was eating fine after he left. Sometimes it takes a while for dogs to process changes," Dr. Wilson explained. "Did something happen recently that might have reminded Max of Ben?" Ella thought back to Friday morning. She'd been cleaning out the spare bedroom closet and found one of Ben's old sweatshirts. She'd left it on the couch, meaning to put it away later. "There was something," she admitted. "I found one of Ben's sweatshirts. Max might have smelled it." Dr. Wilson nodded. That could have triggered his response. Dogs experience grief much like we do, but they can't understand why someone is gone. "So, what do I do?" Ella asked, her eyes burning with unshed tears. Seeing her normally happy, food-loving dog so sad was breaking her heart. "We need to make sure he starts eating soon," Dr. Wilson said. "If he goes much longer, we might need to consider appetite stimulants or even feeding tubes. For now, try tempting him with boiled chicken and rice. Sometimes a change from regular food helps." Ella nodded, remembering how Max would sit at Ben's feet during dinner, knowing Ben would always sneak him a taste of whatever he was eating. "Is there any way to contact Ben?" Dr. Wilson asked. "Even a video call might help Max." Ella shook her head. "Ben's working at a remote research station in Glacier Bay. He said communications would be limited." As they drove home through the gathering dusk, snow began to fall gently on the windshield. Max pressed his nose against the passenger window, his breath fogging the glass. Back home, Ella boiled chicken and rice as Dr. Wilson had suggested. The cabin filled with the appetizing smell, but when she placed the bowl in front of Max, he sniffed it once and turned away. "Oh, Max," Ella whispered, sitting beside him on the floor. "I miss him too." Max looked at her with those sad brown eyes, then turned back to the window where snowflakes danced in the porch light. Ella followed his gaze to the empty driveway, understanding finally dawning on her. Max wasn't just sad. He was waiting. The Labrador was watching for headlights that wouldn't come, for the sound of a truck engine he somehow knew, for the one person whose absence had left a hole too big for even chicken and rice to fill. And until that person returned, Max's bowl would remain silent. The night grew colder as Ella curled up on her couch, a worn quilt wrapped around her shoulders. Outside, the snowfall had thickened, covering their yard in a fresh white blanket. She flipped through the calendar hanging in the kitchen, counting the days since Ben had left. Exactly 3 weeks and 2 days. Max had settled by the door now, his head resting on his paws, eyes fixed on the wooden entrance as if willing it to open. It wasn't supposed to be this long, Ella whispered to herself. She closed her eyes, letting her mind drift back to the month before, when their cabin had been filled with laughter and warmth despite the freezing February temperatures outside. Though memory was crystal clear, Ella had been sorting through photos on her laptop at the kitchen table, shots of wolves she'd taken near Blackerby Ridge. The images were for a conservation magazine that had commissioned her work. Ben had been cooking dinner, filling the cabin with the smell of fresh halibut he'd caught that morning from a friend's boat in Aukie Bay. "This one's perfect," Ben had said, looking over her shoulder at a photo of a silver-gray wolf standing alert on a snowy ridge. His breath had been warm against her cheek. "You think so?" Ella had asked, leaning back against him. "Absolutely. You have a gift, Ella." Max had been there too, of course, sitting perfectly at Ben's feet in the kitchen, his eyes tracking every movement of the fish in the pan. Unlike most labs, Max never jumped or stole food. Ben had trained him too well for that. "You just want a taste, don't you, buddy?" Ben had laughed, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. He'd carefully removed a small piece of fish from the hot pan, blown on it to cool it down, and placed it in his palm. "Gentle," he reminded Max. The chocolate lab had delicately taken the fish from Ben's hand, his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. "You've spoiled him," Ella had said, smiling. "Nah, we just understand each other." Ben had winked at Max as if they shared a secret. That evening, after dinner, they'd taken Max for a walk along the trail behind their cabin. The northern lights had appeared, green and purple ribbons dancing across the dark sky. They'd stood, together in the snow, heads tilted back in wonder, Max leaning against Ben's legs. "I never saw the aurora before I moved to Alaska," Ben had said quietly. "Now I can't imagine living anywhere else." "Is that right?" Ella had asked, her heart beating a little faster. "Yeah," he'd said, looking down at her. "Got everything I need right here." Max had barked then, as if in agreement, and they'd all laughed. Later that night, the phone call had come. Ella remembered how Ben's face had changed as he listened to the voice on the other end. "When?" he'd asked, his voice tight. "How bad?" "Yeah, I understand. I can be ready in an hour." He'd hung up and turned to Ella, his expression serious. "That was Mike from Glacier Bay Marine Mammal Rescue. There's an injured orca near Gustavus. The regular team is stuck in Sitka because of weather, and they need someone with my experience." "How long will you be gone?" Ella had asked. "A few days, maybe a week at most," Ben had replied, already moving toward the spare bedroom where he kept his gear. "The research station is pretty remote. Cell service will be spotty, but I'll call when I can." Max had followed Ben around the cabin as he packed, watching intently as if memorizing everything that went into the duffel bag. When it was time to leave, Ben had knelt in front of Max, taking the dog's face in his hands. "You take care of Ella while I'm gone, all right? I'll be back before you know it." Max had licked Ben's face once, then sat down, looking solemn as if understanding the importance of his assignment. Ben had hugged Ella tightly at the door. "I'm sorry about this," he'd whispered into her hair. "It's okay. Those whales need you," she'd replied. "Just come back soon. Count on it." He'd smiled and pressed something small and cool into her palm. "Keep this safe for me." Ella had opened her hand to find a small wooden wolf carving, beautifully detailed. "Did you make this?" "Yeah. Been working on it for a while," he'd admitted. "A reminder that I'll always find my way back to the pack." The last image Ella had of Ben was him trudging through the snow to his truck, his breath visible in the cold, air, duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Max had sat at attention by the door, watching until the red taillights of Ben's truck disappeared down the snowy road. The first week after Ben left, had been fine. Max had been a bit quieter than usual, but he'd eaten normally and kept to their routine of morning walks and evening play sessions. Ella had received one brief call from Ben, his voice breaking up over the satellite phone. The orca, critical. Staying longer. No reception. The call had dropped before she could ask more questions. By the second week, Max had started spending more time at the window, watching the driveway. But he'd still been eating and playing with his favorite rope toy when Ella encouraged him. It was only after she'd found Ben's old university sweatshirt stuffed in the back of the coat closet that Max's behavior had changed dramatically. She'd pulled it out, intending to wash it, and Max had come running at the scent, sniffing the fabric excitedly, tail wagging for the first time in days. "I know, buddy. It smells like him," Ella had said. But when Ben hadn't appeared with the sweatshirt, Max had sunk into this new state of silent waiting, refusing food, barely acknowledging Ella except for quick bathroom breaks outside. Now, as the clock ticked past midnight, Ella watched Max's steady breathing at his post by the door. She'd tried calling Ben's cell phone and the main number for the research station several times over the past few days. The cell went straight to voicemail, and at the station, someone named Karen had told her Ben was in the field and couldn't be reached. Ella picked up the small wooden wolf carving from the coffee table, running her thumb over its smooth surface. "A reminder that I'll always find my way back to the pack," Ben had said. She looked around the cabin, at her photography, equipment neatly stacked by the door, Ben's fishing gear in the corner, Max's collection of toys in a basket by the fireplace. For the first time, the space felt too big, too quiet, empty despite her presence. "He'll come back, Max," Ella whispered into the silence. "He has to." But as another day dawned with no word from Ben, and Max turned away from yet another bowl of food, even Ella was beginning to wonder if her words were true. Morning light filtered through the frost-covered windows of the cabin. Ella stood at the kitchen counter, stirring scrambled eggs with bits of bacon mixed in, yet another attempt to tempt Max to eat something, anything. "Day 5, she muttered, glancing at the calendar. 5 days without food was dangerous for a dog, especially a big Labrador like Max. She set the plate of eggs on the floor beside Max, who was still stationed by the front door. The dog sniffed once, then turned his head away, his eyes fixed on the door handle. "Please, Max," Ella begged, kneeling beside him. "You have to eat." Max's ribs were becoming visible beneath his chocolate coat, which had lost its healthy shine. His eyes, usually bright and alert, had a dull, far-away look. Ella picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number for the Glacier Bay Research Station again. "Glacier Bay Marine Mammal Research. This is Karen," answered the now familiar voice. "Hi, Karen. It's Ella Parker. Again. I really need to speak with Ben Cooper. It's urgent." There was a pause on the other end. "I'm sorry, Ms. Parker. As I told you yesterday, Dr. Cooper is still in the field with the rescue team. They're tracking the injured orca's pod." "It's been over 3 weeks," Ella said, her voice rising. "Surely he has access to some form of communication." The team took the satellite phone, but reception is extremely limited in the fjords, Karen explained patiently. "I've noted your calls each time. I promise he'll get your messages when he returns to base." "When will that be?" Ella pressed. "I wish I could tell you," Karen sighed. "These operations can be unpredictable. The weather hasn't been cooperating either." After hanging up, Ella sat on the floor beside Max, scratching behind his ears. "What are we going to do, buddy?" She looked around the cabin for inspiration and spotted her hiking backpack. A thought struck her. "Come on, Max, let's try something." For the first time in days, Ella managed to get Max into her Subaru without much coaxing. Perhaps the change of scenery would help. They drove through Juneau, past the cruise ship docks, empty this time of year, and toward Skater's Cabin Park near Mendenhall Lake. This was Max's favorite place in the world. He and Ben had spent countless hours here playing fetch on the pebbly beach, swimming in the lake during summer, and hiking the trails that wound around the massive glacier. When they arrived, the parking lot was nearly empty. Just one other car, probably. Another local enjoying the rare break in the clouds. Ella opened the door for Max, who stepped out slowly, his nose working the air. "Remember this place?" she asked hopefully. Max looked around, his tail giving a single half-hearted wag. It wasn't much, but it was the first sign of interest he'd shown in days. They walked along the shore of Mendenhall Lake, the massive blue-white glacier reflecting in the still water. In the distance, Nugget Falls thundered down the mountainside, a white ribbon against dark rock. "Ben brought you here the day he found you," Ella said softly, remembering the story Ben had told her. He'd been working as a guide at Mendenhall Glacier Visitor Center 3 years ago when a tourist had approached him, holding a skinny, shivering chocolate lab puppy. The tourist had found the puppy abandoned in the parking lot with no collar or ID. Ben had taken one look at those sad brown eyes and fallen in love. He'd named the puppy Max after the famous sled dog who had helped deliver life-saving medicine to Nome, Alaska, during the 1925 diphtheria outbreak. "He said you were meant to be together," Ella continued, watching Max carefully. "Said it was fate." Max walked to the edge of the water, staring across the lake toward the ice caves that formed. At the glacier's edge during winter, Ben had often taken him exploring there. For a wild moment, Ella wondered if Ben might be there now, somehow stranded in the maze of blue ice. But that was ridiculous. Ben was miles away in Glacier Bay, not here. "Let's try something else," Ella said. Back in the car, she drove to Thunder Mountain Trailhead, another spot Ben and Max frequented. Then to Aukie Recreation Area, where Ben had taught Max to swim. At each place, Max showed a flicker of interest before settling back into his listless state. By afternoon, Ella was desperate. She stopped at Rainbow Foods, the local grocery store, and bought every type of dog food they carried. Wet food, dry kibble, organic freeze-dried varieties, even expensive imported brands. She added dog treats shaped like fish, bacon strips, and peanut butter cookies. Back home, she lined up all the options on the kitchen floor. "There has to be something here you'll eat," she said, watching hopefully as Max sniffed each bowl. He walked away without taking a single bite. Ella sank to the floor, tears welling in her eyes. She needed help. But who could understand what Max was going through? Who knew Max as well as Ben did? Her eyes fell on Ben's old sweatshirt, still draped over the back of the couch where she'd left it after finding it in the closet. "Of course," she whispered, grabbing the sweatshirt and holding it out to Max. "Here, boy, smell this." Max approached cautiously, his nose twitching. He sniffed the fabric, then looked up at Ella with the first real alertness she'd seen in days. His tail wagged slightly. "You miss him too, don't you?" she said, her voice breaking. "You're not just sad, Max. You're heartbroken." Max whined softly, pawing at the sweatshirt. Ella pulled her phone from her pocket and scrolled through her photos until she found one of Ben with Max. She held the screen toward the dog. "Look, it's Ben." Max studied the photo, then barked once, the first sound he'd made in days. "That's it," Ella exclaimed. "You need to know he's coming back." She grabbed her laptop and pulled up more photos, displaying them for Max. pictures of Ben fishing, Ben hiking, Ben laughing as Max shook water all over him after a swim. With each image, Max seemed more animated, watching intently. But when Ella finally closed the laptop, Max's brief excitement faded. He walked back to his spot by the door and lay down, head on paws, eyes fixed on the entrance. "Oh, Max," Ella whispered. "I don't know what else to do." She pulled out her phone and tried Ben's number one more time, straight to voicemail. "Ben," she said after the beep, her voice cracking. "It's me again. I don't know if you're getting these messages, but something's wrong with Max. He won't eat. It's been 5 days now. The vet says it's emotional. I think he's waiting for you. Please, if you get this, call me back. We need you." Ella hung up and looked at Max's thinning frame. How much longer could he go on like this? Labs were known for their hearty appetites, their enthusiasm for life. This silent vigil wasn't just unusual, it was dangerous. Outside, dark clouds gathered over the mountains, bringing the promise of another storm. Somewhere out there was Ben, hopefully safe, hopefully coming home soon. But as another day ended with no word from Ben, and Max's bowl remained untouched, Ella could feel hope slipping away like the last light of day. That night, Ella slept on, the couch instead of her bed, wanting to stay close to Max, who remained by the door. Outside, the wind began to howl, rattling the windows of the cabin. Weather in southeast Alaska could change in an instant, especially in March when winter and spring battled for control. Sometime around midnight, Ella woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. She fumbled for it in the darkness, her heart leaping. "Ben?" she answered without checking the screen. "Ella, it's Dr. Wilson." The veterinarian's voice was clear despite the late hour. "I'm sorry to call so late, but I've been thinking about Max. Has he eaten anything yet?" Ella sat up, rubbing her eyes. "No, nothing. I've tried everything. I've been researching cases. Like this," Dr. Wilson said. "Sometimes when dogs experience separation from someone they're bonded with, they can go into a state similar to depression. The longer it continues, the more dangerous it becomes." "What can I do?" Ella asked, looking at Max's sleeping form by the door. "If he doesn't eat by tomorrow, we need to consider a feeding tube," Dr. Wilson said gently. "I don't want to scare you, but a dog his size can't go much longer without nutrition." After hanging up, Ella couldn't fall back asleep. She pulled her HeSees laptop onto her knees and searched for information about dogs grieving. The stories she found were heartbreaking. Dogs who stopped eating after losing their owners. Dogs who waited at train stations or hospitals for people who would never return. Was that what Max was doing? Waiting for someone who might never come back? "No," Ella whispered into the darkness. "Ben will come back. He promised." Outside, the wind grew stronger. Snow began to pelt the windows like tiny fists demanding entry. By morning, the cabin was eerily silent. Ella blinked awake, confused by the unusual stillness. The digital clock on the microwave was dark. The heater wasn't running. The power was out. "Great," she muttered, pulling her blanket tighter around her shoulders. Max was already awake, standing at the window watching the snowfall. Outside, the world had turned white. Snow was piled halfway up the front door, and fat flakes continued to fall from a sky the color of steel. Ella's phone pinged with an emergency alert. "Winter storm warning. Record snowfall expected for Juneau area. 24 to 36 inches possible. Avoid all unnecessary travel. Potential for extended power outages." "Looks like we're stuck here, buddy," Ella told Max, who didn't seem to care about the weather. She tried the landline. Dead. Her cell phone showed only one bar of service. She sent a quick text to Dr. Wilson. "Storm hit. Can't bring Max in. Power out. We'll try to get him to eat." The reply came a few minutes later. "Stay safe. Keep him warm. Call if emergency." Ella moved around the cabin, gathering supplies, candles, matches, extra blankets. She filled pots with water in case the pipes froze. Through the window, she could barely make out her car, now just a snow-covered lump in the driveway. As she worked, Ella talked to Max, trying to keep both their spirits up. "Remember the big storm 2 years ago? When Ben built that igloo in the backyard? You kept trying to eat it, you goofy dog." Max's ears perked up at Ben's name, but his eyes remained fixed on the door. By afternoon, the temperature in the cabin had dropped to the point where Ella could see her breath. She pulled on extra layers, thermal underwear beneath jeans, 2 pairs of socks, a fleece, and Ben's old sweatshirt over everything else. The wood stove in the corner became her focus. Ben usually handled the fires, but Ella knew the basics. She knelt before the stove, arranging kindling and newspaper, then adding split logs from the stack Ben had prepared before leaving. The fire caught quickly, and soon the main room of the cabin was bathed in a warm orange glow. "Come here, Max," Ella called, patting the floor beside her. "It's warmer." To her surprise, Max didn't move. Instead, his body suddenly tensed, ears forward, nose working the air. "What is it, boy?" she asked. Max barked, a sharp, alert sound that cut through the quiet cabin like a knife. Ella froze. "What do you hear?" Max barked again, his tail beginning to wag. He scratched at the door, whining urgently. Hope flared in Ella's chest. Could it be Ben? Had he somehow made it back through the storm? She rushed to the door, fumbling with the lock. "Ben? Is that you?" The moment she cracked the door open, Max shoved his nose into the gap, forcing it wider. Before Ella could grab his collar, he squeezed through and plunged into the deep snow. "Max! No!" Ella screamed, watching in horror as the chocolate lab disappeared into the swirling white. "Come back!" But Max was gone, his dark shape swallowed by the blizzard. Ella stood frozen in the doorway, her mind racing. She had to go after him. In his weakened state, Max wouldn't last long in the bitter cold. She slammed the door and rushed to gather essentials. Her heaviest coat, snowshoes, a flashlight, extra batteries, a thermos of hot water, energy bars, her phone, and a bright, orange emergency whistle Ben had insisted they keep by the door. Geared up, she opened the door again and stepped into the storm. The wind hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath. Snow immediately found its way down her collar and into her boots. Visibility was maybe 10 feet at most. "Max!" she called, her voice snatched away by the wind. She blew the whistle, its shrill cry cutting through the storm's roar. Ella strapped on her snowshoes and began to follow Max's tracks, which were already filling with fresh snow. The dog had headed straight for the forest trail behind their cabin, the same trail that eventually led to Mendenhall Lake and the glacier beyond. "Why now, Max?" Ella muttered through frozen lips. "Why run in the worst storm of the year?" She slogged through the deepening snow. Ella's mind raced with possibilities. Had Max heard something she couldn't? Smelled something on the wind? Or had he simply given up waiting and decided to search for Ben himself? The thought chilled her, more than the biting wind. Max was following some instinct, some pull toward the person he missed most. But in this weather, following that pull could kill him. 20 minutes into her trek, the trees around her began to groan under the weight of snow. Branches cracked like gunshots in the frozen air. Ella's fingers and toes had gone numb despite her gloves and thermal socks. She paused to check her phone. No service. The GPS app showed her position, but the map kept freezing. She was somewhere between her cabin and Mendenhall Lake, but exactly where was impossible to tell in the whiteout conditions. "Max!" she called again, blowing the whistle 3 times. This time, she thought she heard a bark in response, distant but distinct. "Max! Come here, boy!" She waited, straining to hear above the wind. Nothing. Had she imagined it? Was her mind playing tricks, giving her false hope in the punishing cold? Ella pushed forward, determined to find her dog. The snow was up to her thighs now, even with snowshoes. Her legs burned with the effort of lifting them for each step. Through the curtain of white, she spotted a dark shape ahead, too big to be Max. As she drew closer, she realized it was a fallen tree, its massive trunk blocking the trail. She was trying to figure out how to get around it when she heard a sound that made her blood run cold, the deep, resonant crack of ice breaking. She froze, listening intently. The sound came again, followed by a hollow boom that she felt in her chest. With sudden, terrifying clarity, Ella realized where she was, not on the forest trail at all, but on Mendenhall Lake itself. The ice, hidden beneath feet of snow, was shifting and groaning beneath her. "Wait! Oh, God!" she whispered, her breath coming in quick, frightened puffs. She had to turn back, now. But which way was back? The swirling snow had erased her tracks. Every direction looked the same, an endless expanse of white. And somewhere out in that frozen wasteland was Max, growing weaker by the minute, following some invisible thread that led to Ben. Ella blew. The whistle again, 3 desperate blasts that echoed across the hidden lake. This time, there was no answering bark. Panic threatened to overwhelm her as the wind howled across the frozen lake. Ella forced herself to think clearly. What would Ben do in this situation? He'd spent years as a wilderness guide before becoming a marine biologist. He'd taught outdoor survival courses. "Stay calm," she whispered to herself, remembering Ben's first rule of survival. Panic kills faster than cold. She pulled out her phone again, shielding the screen from the snow with her body. Still no service, but the compass app might work. She needed to move in one direction, any direction, until she reached the shore. The compass wavered, then steadied, pointing north. Ella chose east, which should lead toward the shore nearest to town. She took careful steps, testing the ice, before putting her full weight down, listening for any more ominous cracks. Her thoughts turned to Max. Had he also wandered onto the lake? Or had his instincts kept him on solid ground? The idea of him falling through the ice made her stomach twist with fear. "Please be okay," she whispered into the wind. "Please find shelter." After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Ella's snowshoe hit something solid beneath the snow. Not ice, but rock. She'd reached the shore. Relief flooded through her, but it was short-lived. She was safe from the dangerous ice, but she was still lost in a blizzard, and Max was still missing. Ella pulled out her whistle again and gave 3 more blasts. This time, instead of listening for Max, she listened for any human response. Someone might be nearby, a ranger, another hiker, anyone. To her surprise, she heard a faint reply, not a bark or a human voice, but the distinctive sound of another emergency whistle, far in the distance. "Hello!" she screamed into the wind. "I need help! My dog is missing!" She blew her whistle again. 3 blasts, the universal signal for emergency. 2 whistle blasts answered, "I'm coming to you." Ella waited, stamping her feet to keep the blood flowing, clapping her gloved hands together. After about 10 minutes, she saw a light bobbing through the trees. a powerful flashlight cutting through the snow. "Hello?" A male voice called. "Where are you?" "Here," Ella shouted, waving her arms, even though she knew it was probably impossible to see her. By the shore, a figure emerged from the whiteout, dressed in a bright red parka with "Juneau Search and Rescue" emblazoned across the back. A middle-aged man with a gray beard crusted with ice peered at her from beneath a snow-covered hood. "Ma'am, are you Ella Parker?" he asked, his voice raised against the wind. Ella nodded, surprised. "How did you know? Dr. Wilson called us when she couldn't reach you. Said you might be out looking for your dog." He gestured toward a trail Ella couldn't see. "I've got a snowmobile about 50 yards that way. Let's get you warmed up then. We can look for your lab." "You know about Max?" Ella asked, following the man's tracks through the deep snow. "Whole town knows by now. We've got 6 teams out looking. This storm's no joke. They're calling it the worst in 20 years. The snowmobile was parked in a small clearing, its engine still running. The man, who introduced himself as Jim from Juneau Mountain Rescue, helped Ella onto the back and handed her an extra helmet. "Hold tight," he instructed, gunning the engine. They sped through the forest, the snowmobile's powerful headlight cutting a path through the darkness. Ella clung to Jim's back, her thoughts fixed on Max. 6 search teams, the whole town looking. Maybe, just maybe, they'd find him in time. 20 minutes later, they arrived at a small warming hut near the Mendenhall Glacier Visitor Center. Inside, a group of people in search and rescue gear huddled around maps spread on a table. A radio crackled with voices reporting in from different sectors. A woman with short salt and pepper hair looked up as they entered. "You found her? Good job, Jim." She turned to Ella. "I'm Sarah Chen, incident commander for this search. We've got teams covering the main trails and lake shores. Can you tell us exactly where and when your dog ran off?" Ella described the events. Max's sudden alertness, his dash into the storm, the direction he'd headed. "And he hasn't eaten in 5 days?" Sarah asked, frowning. "No. The vet says it's emotional. He's missing someone." Ella's voice caught. "My friend Ben." Sarah nodded sympathetically. Dogs can form incredibly strong bonds. I once had a shepherd who wouldn't leave my husband's side for a week after he came home from the hospital. She turned to the map. Based on where you live and the direction Max headed, he was probably trying to reach Mendenhall Lake. Dogs have amazing instincts. He might have been heading for places he associates with Ben. "That's what I thought too," Ella said. "When I realized I'd wandered onto the lake, I was terrified he might have done the same." "We have a team checking the lake with ice safety gear," Sarah assured her. "Another group is searching the East Glacier Trail and Nugget Falls area. The weather's making it tough, but we have the advantage of numbers." Ella nodded gratefully. The fact that so many people had come out in this terrible storm to help find Max was overwhelming. "Have you had any news from Ben?" Sarah asked. "It might help to know if he's on his way back." "Nothing," Ella said, the worry evident in her voice. "He's at a remote research station in Glacier Bay. Limited communication." Sarah handed Ella a steaming cup of coffee from a thermos. "Drink this. We need you warm and alert. As soon as the current teams report back, we'll send you out with Jim again to keep searching." For the next 3 hours, Ella waited anxiously as reports came in from search teams scattered across the Mendenhall Valley. No sign of Max. The storm grew worse, forcing some teams to return to base for safety. By midnight, only 4 teams remained in the field. "We're not giving up," Sarah assured Ella, who sat staring out the window at the endless white. "But we need to be smart about this. People can die in these conditions." "He's all I have," Ella whispered, her voice breaking. "Ugh, him and Ben. I can't lose them both." Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll find your dog. But I need to know, how well trained is Max? Will he respond to strangers calling his name?" Ella thought about it. Ben trained him really well. He knows come and stay from anyone who says it confidently. But he's weak from not eating, and he's focused on finding Ben. I'm not sure he'd respond normally. Does he have any distinctive features? Something our teams could spot in low visibility? "He's wearing a blue collar with silver tags," Ella said. "And he has a small white patch on his chest, shaped kind of like a star." Sarah relayed this information over the radio to the remaining teams. Around 1 a.m., the radio crackled to life. "Base, this is Team 3. Over." Sarah grabbed the handset. "Team 3, this is Base. Go ahead." "We found something near the west. Glacier Trail Junction. A dog collar, blue with silver tags. Name on the tag is Max. No sign of the dog. Over." Ella's heart sank. Max without his collar? That couldn't be good. "Location?" Sarah asked sharply. "About half a mile from the lake overlook, in a stand of spruce trees. We're continuing to search the area, but visibility is near zero now." Over. Sarah glanced at Ella. "We'll get out there at first light with fresh teams. The dogs might have better luck tracking him." "But he could be hurt," Ella protested. "He could be freezing to death right now." "We're doing everything we can," Sarah said, firmly. "The team that found his collar will keep searching that area all night. But I can't send you back out in these conditions." Ella knew she was right, but the thought of Max alone in the storm, without even his collar for identification, was unbearable. She pictured him huddled under a fallen tree or in a snow cave, growing weaker by the hour, still watching, still waiting for Ben. She pulled out her phone, checking for service. One bar flickered, then disappeared. She tried calling Ben's number. Anyway, straight to voicemail, as always. "Ben," she said after the beep, her voice tight with tears. "Max ran away. There's a terrible storm. Search and rescue is looking for him, but they only found his collar. He's still out there somewhere, looking for you. Please, if you get this, call me back. I don't know what to do." The night dragged on endlessly. Ella dozed in a chair, jerking awake whenever the radio crackled with updates. None of them mentioned Max. At dawn, the storm finally began to ease. The wind died down, and the snow lightened from a blinding curtain to gentle, fat flakes. Sarah organized fresh search teams, including volunteers who had arrived during the night after hearing about the missing Labrador. "The good news," Sarah told Ella as they prepared to head out, "is that the snow might have created insulation for Max. If he found shelter, he could have survived the night." "And the bad news?" Ella asked. Sarah hesitated. "A dog that hasn't eaten in nearly 6 days, in temperatures this cold. His reserves would be very low." Ella nodded, understanding what Sarah wasn't saying. Time was running out. As they prepared to leave the warming hut, a volunteer rushed in, his face flushed with excitement. "We found fresh tracks by the glacier. Viewing area, definitely canine, heading toward the West Glacier Trail." Hope surged through Ella. "That has to be Max." For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they would find him alive. But as she stepped outside into the brightening day, seeing the vast white landscape stretching in every direction, Ella couldn't help but wonder if finding Max's tracks was just another cruel way for Hope to break her heart all over again. 120 miles northwest of Juneau, Ben Cooper stood on the deck of a small research vessel, his eyes scanning the choppy waters of Glacier Bay. 3 weeks had turned into nearly 4, and every day away from Ella and Max felt like an eternity. The injured orca, a young female they'd named Luna, swam alongside the boat, her damaged dorsal fin now healing nicely thanks to the revolutionary treatment they'd administered. Her pod stayed close by, their dark fins breaking the surface of the steel-gray water with graceful precision. "She's looking good," said Mike Townsend, the director of Glacier Bay Marine Mammal Rescue, as he joined Ben at the railing. "The antibiotics are working. Infections clearing up." Ben nodded, relief washing over him. Luna had been near death when they'd found her, her fin nearly severed by what appeared to be a close encounter with a boat propeller. The research team had developed a new flexible bonding agent that allowed them to repair marine mammal injuries without removing the animals from their natural environment. "We're making history here, Cooper," Mike said, clapping Ben on the shoulder. "First successful in-water treatment of this kind. The paper we publish will change marine mammal medicine forever." Any other time, Ben would have been elated. This was groundbreaking work, the kind of research he'd dreamed of doing since graduate school. But all he could think about was getting back to Juneau, back to Ella and Max. "When can we head back?" Ben asked, pulling his wool hat lower against the biting wind. Mike checked his watch. "We need 48 more hours of observation to be sure the bonding agent is holding. Then we can release tracking tags and head home." 2 more days. Ben sighed, his breath forming a cloud in the cold air. "I know you're anxious to get back," Mike said. "Sorry the satellite phone got damaged. These remote locations are communication nightmares." Ben thought back to that stormy night 2 weeks ago, when a rogue wave had crashed over the bow of their small boat, soaking everyone, including the equipment case containing their only satellite phone. They'd tried drying it out, but the damage was done. Their only link to the outside world was gone. The research station on shore had a radio, but it was for emergency communications with the Coast Guard and National Park Service, not personal calls. And the nearest town with cell service was Gustavus, accessible only by boat or plane, neither of which had been options during the recent stretch of bad weather. "Has anyone gotten through on the radio about the weather in Juneau?" Ben asked. Mike shook his head. "Nothing specific. Just general reports about a major storm system moving through southeast Alaska." "Why? Worried about your girl?" "And my dog," Ben admitted. "Max is special. He gets anxious when I'm gone too long." Ben hadn't told anyone on the research team about the real reason for his concern. Before leaving for this trip, he'd been training Max for something important. The most important question Ben had ever planned to ask. The Labrador had been an eager student, learning to carry the small velvet box that contained Ella's engagement ring. The plan had been simple. Ben would return from this short trip, take Ella and Max for a hike to their favorite spot, overlooking Mendenhall Glacier, and then give Max the signal. The Labrador would present Ella with the ring box while Ben got down on one knee. But now, nearly 4 weeks had passed. Was Max still remembering his training? Was Ella worried? Angry? Ben had promised he'd only be gone a week at most. "Tell you what," Mike said, noting Ben's distress. "Weather permitting, we'll try to get you on a float plane to Juneau tomorrow afternoon. You can analyze the final data from there." "Really?" Ben's spirits lifted for the first time in days. "You've been essential to this operation, Ben. But I can see you need to get home." Mike smiled. "Love makes fools of us all, eh?" That night, Ben couldn't sleep. He lay in his narrow bunk in the research vessel's cabin, listening to the gentle slap of waves against the hull and the occasional calls of the orcas in the distance. His mind kept drifting to Ella and Max. He pictured Max waiting by the door, the way he always did when Ben was due home, His chocolate ears perked forward at the slightest sound of an engine. He imagined Ella working on her wildlife photographs, her dark hair falling across her face as she concentrated, the way it always did. Most of all, he thought about the small wooden box hidden in his duffel bag containing the ring he'd carefully selected, a simple band with a small, ethically sourced diamond that reminded him of the clear ice of the glacier where they'd first kissed. As he finally drifted toward sleep, a strange feeling settled over Ben, a sense of urgency he couldn't explain. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones, a deep knowing that went beyond logic. "Max," he whispered into the darkness. "Hold on, buddy. I'm coming home." Morning brought unexpected hope. The storm that had churned up the waters of Glacier Bay for days had finally passed. In the distance, the white peaks of the Fairweather Range stood sharp against a clear blue sky. "Good news," Mike announced as the team gathered for breakfast in the small galley. "Park Service reports the weather window should hold through today. We've arranged for a float plane to pick up Ben at noon." Relief flooded through Ben. By evening, he could be back in Juneau, back with Ella and Max. He packed quickly, carefully wrapping the ring box in one of his shirts for protection. At 11:30, Ben stood on the small dock extending from the research station, his duffel bag at his feet. In the distance, he could hear the faint drone of an approaching plane. Luna and her pod had moved farther out into the bay. But as Ben watched, the young orca suddenly broke away from the group and swam toward the dock. She surfaced about 20 yards away, her heeled dorsal fin clearly visible. "Goodbye, Luna," Ben called, raising his hand. "Stay safe out there." As if in response, the orca slapped her tail against the water, sending up a spray that glittered in the sunlight, before turning to rejoin her family. The float plane touched down smoothly on the bay's surface, creating a wake that rocked the small dock. The pilot, a weathered man named Carl who had been flying in southeast Alaska for 30 years, helped Ben load his gear. "Heading to Juneau?" Carl asked as they buckled into the small aircraft. "Yes, straight there if possible," Ben replied. "Should be a smooth flight," Carl said, adjusting his headset. "Though I hear they got hit pretty hard by the storm. Record snowfall for March." As the plane lifted off the water and banked toward Juneau, Ben stared out the window at the magnificent landscape below. Massive glaciers flowing between snow-capped mountains, dense forests of spruce and hemlock, isolated fjords where whales gathered to feed. It was the most beautiful place he'd ever lived. But its beauty meant nothing without the ones he loved to share it with. The journey would take just over an hour. Ben closed his eyes, imagining the reunion ahead. Ella's smile, Max's excitement. He touched his pocket where he'd transferred the ring box for safekeeping. But as the plane flew southeast, the clear skies began to give way to thickening clouds. Carl frowned at the instruments. "Weather's shifting faster than predicted," he muttered. "Might hit some turbulence." Ben barely heard him. That strange feeling of urgency had returned, stronger now. In his mind, he could almost hear Max barking, calling for him across the miles. "Can this thing go any faster?" Ben asked. Carl gave him a sideways glance. "Something waiting for you in Juneau?" "Someone," Ben corrected. "Two someones, actually. And I think they might need me more than I realized." Carl nodded, understanding flickering across his weathered face. "Girl and a dog? That obvious?" "Ben?" asked with a slight smile. "Written all over your face, son." Carl adjusted the throttle slightly. "I'll get you there as quick as I can. But this weather's not cooperating." Outside the small plane's windows, the clear skies had vanished completely, replaced by a wall of gray clouds. The aircraft began to bounce in the turbulence, dropping suddenly before regaining altitude. Juneau Airport just radioed, Carl said after listening to his headset. They got hammered by the storm. Runway crews are still clearing snow. We might have to divert to Douglas Island and get you a boat across. Ben gripped the armrests as the plane shuddered again. Whatever gets me to Juneau fastest. For the next 40 minutes, they flew through increasingly poor conditions. Visibility dropped until they could barely see the wingtips through the swirling snow. Carl's expression grew more serious as he focused on his instruments. "Good news," he finally announced. "Juneau Tower says they've cleared enough of the runway for us to land. It'll be bumpy, but we'll get you on the ground." The descent into Juneau was like riding a roller coaster blindfolded. The small plane dropped, rose, and shimmied as powerful crosswinds buffeted it. Ben closed his eyes, thinking of Ella and Max, using them as an anchor against his growing nausea. When the wheels finally touched down with a hard bounce, Ben let out the breath he'd been holding. They had made it. "Thanks, Carl," he said, as they taxied toward the small terminal building, nearly hidden behind mountains of plowed snow. "All part of the service," Carl replied with a wink. "Now go find your girl and your dog." Inside the terminal, Ben was shocked by the scene. Dozens of travelers were camped out on benches and floors, stranded by the storm. The departure board showed nearly every flight canceled. He pushed his way to the rental car counter, where a harried-looking agent was dealing with an angry customer. "I'm sorry, sir," she was saying. "We simply don't have any more vehicles available. Everything was reserved days ago when they announced the storm was coming." Ben's heart sank. No rental cars. He pulled out his phone and turned it on for the first time in weeks. No signal. The storm must have affected the cell towers. "Excuse me," he said, when the angry customer finally stormed off. "Is there any way to get to Mendenhall Valley? Any cars at all?" The woman shook her head. "Nothing. You might try the taxi stand, but I heard they've stopped running too. Roads are barely passable." Ben thanked her and moved away, scanning the terminal for options. His eyes fell on a familiar logo, Harry's Heating and Plumbing, on the jacket of a burly man talking on a radio near the exit. "Excuse me," Ben said, approaching the man. "Are you heading out to work?" The man nodded. "Just got called to an emergency at the hospital. Pipe burst from the freezing temperatures." "I live out by Mendenhall," Ben explained quickly. "Been gone for a month on a research project. Need to get home urgently. Any chance you could give me a ride at least part way?" The plumber, whose name tag read Pete, studied Ben's face. "You that marine biologist that's been working with the injured whale? Think I saw something about that in the paper before the storm hit." "That's me," Ben confirmed. "Ben Cooper." Pete seemed to make up his mind. "Hospital's halfway to Mendenhall. I can drop you there, but you'll be on your own after that. Roads are a mess. Tree branches down everywhere. Power lines, too. I'll take it. Thank you." 20 minutes later, Ben was in the passenger seat of Pete's heavy-duty truck, which plowed through the snow-covered streets with relative ease. Downtown, Juneau looked like a ghost town. Snow was piled 6 feet high along the sidewalks, and not a single person was visible on the streets. "Worst storm in 20 years, Pete commented, as they carefully navigated around a fallen tree. "Power's been out in most areas for 2 days now." Ben's concern deepened. Ella and Max, alone in the cabin without power, in freezing temperatures. The thought made his stomach clench. "Any word about Mendenhall Valley?" he asked. Pete shook his head. "Not much coming out of there. Search and rescue has been busy, though. Heard they had teams out all night looking for someone." Before Ben could ask more questions, they arrived at Bartlett Regional Hospital, its windows glowing with emergency, generator power, "This is as far as I go," Pete said, stopping near the entrance. "Good luck getting home." Ben thanked him and stepped out into knee-deep snow. The hospital was only about 4 miles from his cabin, but in these conditions, it might as well have been 40. Inside the hospital lobby, Ben found a security guard and asked about transportation options. "Nothing official running," the guard told him, "but Dr. Wilson over at the veterinary clinic has an ATV with snow tracks. She might be able to help. She lives out that way." Dr. Wilson. The name was familiar. Ella had mentioned taking Max to see her once when he'd eaten something he shouldn't have. "Is there a working phone I could use?" Ben asked. The guard pointed him to a landline at the reception desk. Ben dialed the vet clinic, but there was no answer. He tried Ella's cell again from his own phone, straight to voicemail. With no other options, Ben headed back outside. He would walk if necessary. 4 miles in deep snow would be brutal, but not impossible. He'd hiked much worse terrain during his field research. In the hospital parking lot, he spotted a man clearing snow from around a lifted Jeep Wrangler with massive tires. "Excuse me," Ben called out. "Are you heading toward Mendenhall Valley by any chance?" The man looked up. "As a matter of fact, I am. My wife's on the search and rescue team out there, going to bring them hot food and coffee." Ben's heart raced. "Search and rescue? Do you know what they're searching for?" "A dog, I think. Some Labrador that ran off in the storm. Been missing almost 24 hours now." The world seemed to tilt beneath Ben's feet. A missing Labrador in Mendenhall Valley. It had to be Max. "I need to get out there," Ben said urgently. "That could be my dog, and my girlfriend lives there too." The man studied Ben's face, then nodded. "Hop in. Name's Joe, by the way." "Ben, thank you for this." The Jeep made better progress than Ben had expected, its specialized tires gripping the snow-covered roads. Joe seemed to know exactly which streets would be passable. "Your wife is with Search and Rescue?" Ben asked as they slowly navigated around a downed power line. Joe nodded proudly. "Sarah Chen. She's the incident commander for the Juneau Mountain Rescue Team. Been with them 15 years. And they're looking for a chocolate lab?" Ben pressed. "That's what I heard. Belongs to some wildlife photographer. Dog ran off in the storm. Hasn't eaten in days, apparently." Each word was like a knife in Ben's chest. Max was missing. Hadn't eaten in days. What had happened while he was gone? They were about a mile from the Mendenhall Glacier Visitor Center when disaster struck. As they rounded a curve, a massive wall of white appeared in their headlights. A fresh avalanche had covered the road completely. "Damn," Joe muttered, braking carefully. "Must have just come down. No way around this." Ben stared at the wall of snow, frustration and fear building inside him. So close, yet still too far. "I'll walk from here," he decided. "How far to the visitor center?" "About a mile that way," Joe said, pointing. "But in this snow, I'll make it," Ben interrupted. "I have to." Joe hesitated, then reached into the back seat and pulled out a heavy backpack. "Take this. It has the food and coffee I was bringing to the search teams. Tell Sarah I'll find another way around." Ben thanked him and stepped out into the snow. Again. It was still falling, though not as heavily as the day before. The backpack was a comforting weight on his shoulders as he began trudging toward the visitor center. Halfway there, Ben heard the distinctive rumble of an engine. Through the trees, he spotted a Forest Service truck making its way along a maintenance road. He waved his arms frantically, shouting until his voice was hoarse. The truck slowed, then stopped. "Need a ride?" called a ranger. Ben recognized from his work at the glacier. "Dave!" "Thank God!" Ben gasped. "I need to get to the visitor center. Search and Rescue is looking for my dog." Dave's eyes widened. You're the owner of the chocolate lab? The whole valley's been searching since yesterday. Ben's heart pounded. Have they found him? Not yet. Just his collar, I think. Dave motioned to the passenger seat. Get in. I'll take you straight there. Sathiki Visitor Center had been transformed into a command post. As Ben burst through the doors, conversations stopped, and all eyes turned to him. A woman with short salt and pepper hair approached. You must be Ben, she said. I'm Sarah Chen, Incident Commander, and I believe someone has been waiting a very long time for you. Ben scanned the room, hope rising in his chest. Max? You found him? Sarah's expression sobered. Not yet. I meant Ella. She's out with one of our teams right now, following fresh tracks we found this morning. Ben sagged against the wall, the emotional whiplash overwhelming him. I need to find them. Both of them. Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. We have a team about to head out to where we found Max's collar. You can go with them. As Ben turned to follow Sarah's directions, the building's radio crackled to life. Base, this is Team 2. We've got a situation at Nugget Falls. The ice has given way. We need immediate assistance. Over. Sarah grabbed the radio. Team 2, what's your status? Over. We heard barking near the falls. Female team member went to investigate and broke through the ice. We've got her secured but can't pull her out. The dog is still out there somewhere. Over. Ben's blood turned to ice as Sarah asked the question he was afraid to hear the answer to. Team 2. What's the name of the team member who went through the ice? Over. The radio crackled ominously before the reply came. It's Ella Parker. She went under trying to reach the dog. She's conscious but freezing. We need help fast. Over. The room erupted into action. Sarah barked orders, dispatching the ice rescue team with specialized equipment. Ben stood frozen, the words echoing in his mind. Ella through the ice. Max still missing. I'm going, he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Sarah turned to him. Ben, we have trained professionals. I was a wilderness guide for 5 years before becoming a biologist. Ben interrupted. I'm certified in ice rescue, and it's Ella out there. Sarah studied him for a moment, then nodded. Grab gear from that locker. Team leaves in 2 minutes. Ben moved quickly, pulling on a dry suit over his clothes and gathering rescue equipment, rope, ice picks, a flotation device. His training kicked in, muscle memory taking over as fear threatened to paralyze him. Outside, 2 snowmobiles waited, engines running. Ben climbed onto the back of one, behind a rescuer named Tom. They sped off, following the marked trail toward Nugget Falls. The journey took less than 10 minutes, but to Ben, it felt like hours. As they approached the falls, he could hear the thundering water, partially frozen, but still powerful, as it crashed into Mendenhall Lake below. Team 2 had set up a perimeter with orange markers showing where the ice was dangerous. About 30 yards from shore, Ben could see a dark hole in the white surface, and beside it, 2 rescuers lying flat on the ice, distributing their weight as they worked to secure Ella. She went in about 15 minutes ago, Tom explained as they stopped at the shore. They got a rope to her right away, but the ice keeps breaking when they try to pull her out. Ben scanned the area desperately. And Max? The dog? No sign yet. They heard barking, which is what drew Ella onto the ice. Ben grabbed the rescue sled and started toward the group on the ice. He moved carefully, spreading his weight, testing each step. As he got closer, he could finally see Ella. Her upper body was on the ice, arms stretched out, while her lower half remained in the freezing water. Her face was alarmingly pale, her lips blue from cold. "Ella!" he called. Her head turned, eyes widening in disbelief. "Ben?" Her voice was faint, shaking with cold and confusion. "Is that really you?" "It's me," he confirmed, edging closer. "I'm going to get you out. Just hold on." The two rescuers looked up in relief. "Ice keeps breaking when we pull," one explained. "We need to distribute her weight better." Ben nodded, his mind racing through his training. "We need the ice shelf technique. Slide the sled partially into the water, under her body." Working together, they managed to slide the rescue sled partially into the water. The next part would be tricky, getting Ella onto it without putting pressure on the fragile ice edge. "Ella," Ben called, "we're going to count to 3. Then I need you to push. Up with your arms while we pull the sled." "Can you do that?" She nodded weakly, her eyes never leaving his face, as if afraid he might disappear. 1, 2, 3. Ella pushed while they pulled in perfect unison. The sled slid under her, creating a platform that distributed her weight across the ice. Inch by inch, they pulled her fully onto the ice and began the careful journey back to shore. Once on solid ground, the medical team wrapped Ella in heated blankets. Her clothes were frozen solid, her body shaking uncontrollably. How are you here?" she stammered through chattering teeth. "Just got back," Ben said, holding her icy hands in his. "I'm so sorry I was gone so long. The satellite phone broke, and we were completely cut off." "Max," Ella managed. "He ran off yesterday. We heard him barking by the FA Falls." Ben looked back toward the ice. "I'll find him. I promise." The medical team insisted Ella needed to go to the hospital immediately. Hypothermia was setting in, and her core temperature was dangerously low. "Go," Ben told her. "Get warm. I'll find Max and meet you there." Ella grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "He's stopped eating 5 days ago, after he smelled your sweatshirt." Understanding dawned on Ben. 5 days without food would leave Max desperately weak, especially in these temperatures. "I'll find him," Ben repeated, more determined than ever. As the medical team transported Ella to a waiting ambulance, Ben turned to Sarah. "I need a team. Max is out here somewhere and he's looking for me." Sarah nodded. "Take Tom and Chris. They know the area best." Ben grabbed a whistle from his pocket, the special training whistle he'd used with Max since he was a puppy. The sound carried farther than a human voice, and Max had been trained to come to it no matter what. He blew 3 sharp blasts, then listened intently. Nothing. The 3 men spread out along the shore of the partially frozen lake, each taking a different section. Ben continued blowing the whistle every few minutes as they searched, his hope dimming with each passing moment. "Over here!" Chris suddenly called from near a stand of spruce trees. "I think I heard something." Ben rushed over, his heart pounding. "Where?" Chris pointed toward a snowy hollow beneath a fallen tree. "Sounded like whining." Ben approached slowly, then dropped to his knees beside the hollow. "Max?" he called softly. A faint rustling came from the shadows, then a weak thump, the sound of a tail weakly hitting the ground. Ben peered into the darkness, and his heart nearly stopped. 2 familiar, brown eyes looked back at him from a snow-covered chocolate face. "Max! Oh, buddy! I found you!" Ben reached in carefully, his hands touching matted fur crusted with ice. The Labrador was barely recognizable. His once robust frame had thinned dramatically, his coat dull and patchy with ice. But his eyes, those soulful brown eyes, lit up with recognition. With gentle movements, Ben pulled the weakened dog from his shelter. Max tried to stand but collapsed immediately, his legs too weak to support even his diminished weight. "I've got you," Ben whispered, tears freezing on his cheeks as he lifted the Labrador into his arms. Max felt frighteningly light, and he shivered continuously. "We need to get him warmed up now," Tom said, unfolding an emergency heat blanket. They wrapped Max carefully, tucking the reflective material around his thin body. Ben cradled him close, trying to transfer his own body heat to the freezing dog. "The nearest vet is a 20-minute ride from here," Sarah said, approaching the group. Ben shook his head. "He might not have 20 minutes. The hospital is closer." "Hospital won't treat a dog," Chris pointed out. "Dr. Wilson is at the hospital," Tom remembered. "She's been helping with the search. She's got emergency supplies in her vehicle." Ben nodded. "Let's go, now!" With Max secured in his arms, Ben climbed onto the back of Tom's snowmobile. The Labrador's breathing was shallow, his eyes half closed, but he seemed to be fighting to stay conscious, his gaze never leaving Ben's face. "Stay with me, buddy," Ben murmured as they sped toward the hospital. "Just a little longer." When they arrived, Dr. Wilson was waiting in the parking lot with a portable medical kit. Her eyes widened at the sight of Max's condition. "Get him inside," she ordered, leading them to a heated ambulance bay. "How long has he been out in the elements?" "Almost 24 hours, Ben answered, gently laying Max on a blanket the doctor had spread out. "And he hasn't eaten in 5 days." Dr. Wilson worked quickly, checking Max's vitals, administering fluids through an IV, and using chemical heat packs to begin raising his core temperature. "He's severely dehydrated and hypothermic," she said grimly. "But Labradors are tough, and this one seems to have something to live for." Indeed, despite his weakened state, Max kept his eyes fixed on Ben, as if afraid his human might disappear again if he looked away. "That's right, buddy," Ben said softly, stroking Max's head. "I'm not going anywhere. We're going to see Ella soon." At Ella's name, Max's tail thumped weakly against the blanket. Dr. Wilson smiled slightly. "I've never seen a bond like this. He literally starved himself waiting for you." "I know," Ben whispered, the weight of that devotion nearly crushing him. "And I almost didn't make it back in time." As Max's condition stabilized, one of the emergency room doctors came out to update Ben on Ella. "Ms. Parker is responding well to treatment," she reported. "Her body temperature is rising, and there doesn't appear to be any frostbite. She's asking about you and the dog." "Can we see her?" Ben asked. The doctor hesitated, looking at Max. "We don't normally allow animals in the hospital, but—" She glanced at Dr. Wilson, who nodded. "This is a special case," Dr. Wilson said firmly. "This dog needs to see his family as complete again." With Max wrapped in warm blankets and still attached to a portable IV, Ben carried him through the hospital corridors to Ella's room. When the door opened, Ella turned, her face lighting up, at the sight of the two figures she loved most in the world. "You found him," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You both came back." Ben carefully placed Max on the bed beside Ella, mindful of both their IVs. The chocolate Labrador, though weak, managed to inch closer to Ella, resting his head on her lap with a deep sigh that seemed to release weeks of tension. "I'm so sorry," Ben said, taking a seat on the edge of the bed and grasping Ella's hand. "The satellite phone got damaged the second week. There was no way to call, no way to let you know I was okay." Ella touched his face as if making sure he was real. "I thought maybe you'd decided not to come back," she admitted quietly. "Never," Ben said firmly. "I was going crazy, trying to get home to you both." Dr. Wilson entered the room with a small container of warm broth. "Let's see if we can get some nutrition into this stubborn boy," she said, placing the container near Max's nose. The Labrador sniffed the broth, his tail giving a weak wag, but he didn't move to eat. "Come on, Max," Ella encouraged, stroking his head. "You need to eat now." Max looked up at Ben, as if waiting for permission, or perhaps something more. A thought struck Ben. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the training whistle, giving it one short blast followed by two quick ones, the special signal he'd been teaching Max before he left. The Labrador's ears perked up instantly, his eyes growing more alert. "What was that?" Ella asked, confused. "Just wait," Ben said with a small smile. To everyone's amazement, Max pushed himself up on shaky legs. He looked expectantly at Ben, who nodded encouragingly. "Good boy, Max. Now eat." As if he'd been waiting. For this exact command, Max began to lap at the warm broth, taking slow but steady sips. Dr. Wilson's eyebrows shot up. "Well, I'll be. Whatever you did, worked." "He was just waiting for the right signal," Ben said softly, watching as Max continued to eat for the first time in nearly a week. The next 12 hours were a blur of medical checks, warm fluids, and rest. Ben refused to leave the hospital room, sleeping uncomfortably in a chair between visits to both his patients. Max's condition improved steadily once he started eating again. By morning, he had consumed 3 small meals and was notably stronger. Ella recovered quickly as well. The doctors were amazed that she had escaped with only mild hypothermia and no frostbite despite her time in the icy water. "You were very lucky," the attending physician told her during morning rounds. "Another few minutes in that water, and we'd be having a very different conversation." "When can we go home?" Ella asked, anxious to leave the sterile hospital environment. "I want to keep you for one more day of observation," the doctor replied. "As for Max, Dr. Wilson says he'll need close monitoring, but he can continue his recovery at home if you're discharged tomorrow." That afternoon, Sarah Chen from Juneau Mountain Rescue stopped by with news that power had been restored to most of Mendenhall Valley, including Ella's cabin. "The roads are finally clear too," she added. "You should be able to get home without any problems." "We can't thank you enough," Ben told her, shaking her hand warmly. "Without your team—" "Just doing our job," Sarah replied with a smile. "Though I have to say, this was one of our more unique rescues. That dog of yours is something special." They all looked at Max, who was currently curled up on Ella's bed, his head resting on her leg as she read a book. Though still thin, his eyes had regained their bright, alert expression, and his tail wagged lazily when he noticed their attention. "He never gave up," Ella said. "Even when he was starving, he just kept watching and waiting." The next morning, after final checks from both human and veterinary doctors, Ella and Max were discharged. One of the search and rescue volunteers offered to drive them home in his 4-wheel drive truck. As they approached the cabin, Ben felt a strange mixture of emotions: relief at finally being home, guilt at having been gone so long, and overwhelming gratitude that both Ella and Max had survived their ordeal. The cabin looked like a snow fortress, with drifts piled halfway up the windows and icicles hanging from the eaves. Inside, it was cold, but intact. Ben immediately set to work building a fire in the wood stove, while Ella settled Max on his bed near the warmth. "He's still not quite himself," Ella observed, as the Labrador curled up tightly, watching Ben's every move with intent focus. "Give him time," Ben said, adding another log to the growing fire. "He's been through a lot." As warmth began to fill the cabin, Ben unpacked his duffel bag, carefully removing the items he'd carried all the way from Glacier Bay. Among them was the small wooden box, still safely wrapped in one of his shirts. "I got something for you while I was gone," he told Ella, sitting beside her on the couch. "Well, actually, I had it before I left." Ella looked at him curiously as he handed her the small carved wolf from his pocket, the one he'd given her before, departing. "To go with this," he explained. "It's beautiful," she said, turning the carving in her hands. "But you already gave me this." "It's a set," Ben explained. "The wolf was just the beginning." From his bag, he pulled out 3 more small wooden carvings, a female wolf, a snow hare, and a young wolf pup. "A family," he said softly. "Like us." Tears welled in Ella's eyes as she arranged the carvings on the coffee table. "They're perfect." Ben took a deep breath. This wasn't how he'd planned it. Not exactly. But after everything they'd been through, he couldn't wait any longer. "There's one more thing," he said, heart racing. He reached into his pocket for the ring box. At that moment, Max suddenly stood up from his bed, wobbling slightly on his still weak legs. He moved to Ben's side and sat at attention, eyes fixed on the pocket where Ben's hand rested. Ben and Ella both stared at the Labrador in surprise. "What's he doing?" Ella asked. A slow smile spread across Ben's face. "He remembers." "Remembers? What?" Instead of answering, Ben gave the special whistle signal again. One short blast followed by 2 quick ones. Max's ears perked up, and his entire body seemed to quiver with anticipation. Ben carefully removed the small velvet box from his pocket and held it out. "Take it, Max," he said softly. With gentle precision, Max took the box in his mouth and turned to Ella, sitting directly in front of her, his brown eyes shining with what could only be described as pride. "Oh my God," Ella whispered, looking from Max to Ben and back again. Did you?" "This is what he was waiting for," Ben explained, his voice thick with emotion. "I was training him before I left. He knew he had an important job to do." With trembling hands, Ella took the small velvet box from Max's mouth. The Labrador immediately wagged his tail, looking up at Ben for approval. "Good boy, Max," Ben said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "Perfect job." Max's tail wagged harder, and for the first time since being found in the snow, he looked truly like himself again. Proud, happy, mission accomplished. As Ella opened the box to reveal a simple but beautiful diamond ring, Ben dropped to one knee beside Max. "Ella Parker," he said softly, "will you marry me and make our family official?" Tears streamed down Ella's face as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, to both of you." As Ben slipped the ring onto her finger, Max gave a joyful bark, his first full-strength sound since the ordeal began, and pressed himself against both their legs, forming a circle that finally felt complete. 3 months later, spring had transformed the Mendenhall Valley. Snow still capped the distant mountains, but the forest trails bloomed with wildflowers, and the air filled with the scent of new growth. The lake, once a dangerous sheet of ice, now reflected the blue sky and the majestic glacier beyond. Max bounded ahead on the trail, his chocolate coat once again glossy and thick, his body restored to its healthy weight. No one would guess, looking at the energetic Labrador now, that he had nearly died just months before. "Slow down, buddy," Ben called with a laugh. "The glacier isn't going anywhere." Max paused, looking back at Ben and Ella with what could only be described as impatience. He gave a short bark, then continued trotting up the path, his tail held high. "He knows where we're going," Ella observed, squeezing Ben's hand. "He remembers." Ben nodded. "Of course he does. It's our special place." They were hiking to Nugget Falls, following the same trail where the dramatic rescue had taken place during the storm. But today, under the warm May sunshine, the area looked completely different. welcoming rather than threatening. When they reached the overlook near the falls, Max sat down precisely at the spot where Ben had proposed 3 months earlier. His expression was expectant, almost human in its awareness of the significance. "Smart boy," Ella said, kneeling to ruffle his ears. The diamond on her left hand caught the sunlight, sending tiny rainbows dancing across Max's fur. Ben reached into his backpack and pulled out a checkered blanket, which he spread on a dry patch of ground. From an insulated bag came sandwiches, fruit, and, Max's keen nose immediately detected, his favorite salmon treats. "It's hard to believe everything that happened," Ella said as they settled on the blanket. "Sometimes it feels like a dream." "A nightmare, you mean?" Ben corrected, passing her a sandwich. "I still can't believe I was gone for so long without any contact." "The important thing is, you came back," Ella said. "You both did." She glanced at Max, who was sniffing around the edges of the blanket, ever the vigilant explorer. Max had made a remarkable recovery after that first meal in the hospital. Once he started eating again, his strength returned quickly. The veterinarian had called it miraculous, but Ben and Ella knew the truth. Max had simply been waiting to complete his mission. Ben watched the Labrador with undisguised affection. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about why Max stopped eating." "He was waiting for you," Ella said. "He missed you." "Yes, but it was more than that." Ben pulled a small pouch from his pocket. "There's something I never told you about the training Max and I were doing before I left?" Ella looked at him curiously. "The proposal training?" Ben nodded. "That was part of it. But there was more." He gave the special whistle. One short blast followed by 2 quick ones. Max immediately returned to the blanket and sat at attention. "Good boy," Ben said, giving him a salmon treat. "Remember our secret?" Max's tail thumped against the ground, his eyes fixed on Ben's pocket. "When I was training Max to carry the ring box," Ben explained, "I was also teaching him something else. A special responsibility." He pulled a small velvet pouch from his pocket and held it out. Max gently took it in his mouth, holding it carefully as he'd been trained to do. "What's this?" Ella asked, watching as Max sat patiently, the pouch held delicately between his teeth. "The real reason he wouldn't eat," Ben said softly. "It wasn't just that he missed me, or even that he was waiting to help with the proposal. He was guarding something precious." Ben gave another whistle signal, different from the first. Max approached Ella and placed the pouch in her outstretched hand. With curious fingers, Ella opened the drawstring. Inside was a small silver cylinder, like a tiny capsule. "I don't understand," she said, examining it. "Open it," Ben encouraged. Ella carefully unscrewed the top of the cylinder. Inside was a tightly rolled piece of paper. She gently extracted it and unrolled it to reveal a handwritten note. "Ella, if you're reading this, it means Max has completed his mission. Before I left for Glacier Bay, I entrusted him with this message, hidden in his collar where only he knew. It existed. I taught him to protect it until we were all together again. I've loved you from the moment we met. You and Max are my world, my family, my home. No matter where my work takes me, I will always find my way back to you both. Forever yours, Ben." Tears filled Ella's eyes as she looked up from the note. "You put this in his collar before you left? All those weeks ago?" Ben nodded. "The night before I left, I had a feeling the trip might be longer than expected, so I wanted you to have a message from me, no matter what. I put it in a special compartment, in his collar that only Max knew about." "But his collar was found in the snow," Ella said. confusion crossing her face. The search team found it the night he ran away. The outer collar, yes, Ben agreed. But look at this. He reached for Max, gently parting the fur around the Labrador's neck to reveal a much thinner, nearly invisible inner collar made of soft, flexible material. A backup collar? Ella asked, reaching out to touch it. With a waterproof pocket, Ben confirmed. I trained Max to protect it at all costs, to never let anyone remove it except me, or you, if I gave him the special signal. Ella's eyes widened as understanding dawned. So, when he ran away during the storm, he wasn't just looking for me, Ben explained. He was protecting the message. When his outer collar came off, his training kicked in. He had to keep the inner ones safe. And that's why he wouldn't eat, Ella whispered, the final piece falling into place. He thought if he let his guard down, even to eat, he might fail in his mission, Ben finished. Labradors are incredibly loyal, but Max goes beyond that. He was willing to starve rather than fail us. Fresh tears spilled down Ella's cheeks as she wrapped her arms around Max's neck. You wonderful, stubborn, loyal boy, she murmured into his fur. Max licked her face once, then looked at Ben, his expression almost questioning. Yes, buddy, Ben said, reaching for the small bag of treats. Mission accomplished. You did perfectly. The Labrador's entire body seemed to relax as he accepted a salmon treat from Ben's hand. It was as if a weight had been lifted. The weight of responsibility he'd carried silently for weeks. I can't believe he understood all that, Ella said, wiping away tears. That level of dedication. Dogs understand more than we give them credit for, Ben replied, especially when it comes to love and loyalty. As if to emphasize the point, Max settled himself between them, his head resting on Ella's lap, his back pressed against Ben's leg. Ella stroked his soft ears, marveling at the depth of connection between the three of them. So this was your secret all along? She said to Max. You weren't just pining, you were protecting. Most people would never guess that behind a Labrador's refusal to eat was a love so strong and a sense of duty so powerful, Ben said, watching as Max's eyes drifted, closed in contentment. The message, now freed from its hiding place, fluttered slightly in the spring breeze. Ella carefully re-rolled it and placed it back in its protective cylinder. I'll keep this forever, she promised, tucking it safely in her pocket. A reminder of what real devotion looks like. From his place between them, Max gave a deep, satisfied sigh. His mission was complete. His family was together, and his secret, the true reason for his sacrifice, was finally understood. As the three of them sat together beside the thundering falls, with the glacier shining in the distance, the circle that had been broken was now stronger than ever, bound by a love that had withstood separation, starvation, and storm. A love that had finally brought them all home. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this tale of devotion, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories like this one. Your support helps us continue sharing these touching moments. Don't forget to share this video with friends and family who might appreciate Max's remarkable story. Together, we can spread kindness and awareness about the incredible bonds we share with our animal companions. Until next time, thank you for listening.